We're going to move on to working with our next modeling tool with splines. This is going to be Bevel Profile. Now, in this case, I'm going to show you another way. If you've downloaded the zip file, you can move that zip file to wherever you're keeping your files located, right? Your Max files, keeping them organized. In this case, I'm keeping mine in my Max 22 scenes folder. You can see the zip file here. I'm just going to right click on it and go down, and there's an option called Extract to All. And here you can specify a destination. You could browse to locate another one. In this case, I like the location it's in, so I'm going to click Extract. You can see that automatically popped open the folder it's in. I can just close that. I'm going to delete my zip file now, because you see there's a folder up here, Splines Bevel Profile, and there's a Max file, and there's an image. So I can copy this path. I can say File, Open, paste that path in there and hit Enter. It'll take me right to that spot. And now I can click on the Max file there and say Open. You may get the error about it being a student version. That's okay. My versions of Max are educational copies that I get. So it's just saying that it was made with a previous version. That was a student version. So all right, so this is what you're seeing here. So I have a Max file. In this case, the reference, you can see it visibly from above. I've turned on default shading. Here in perspective, you can see the reference as well. The reference is a little bit lower than the ground because we're going to create some geometry out of it. So I'm just going to come over here and click on the little plus sign and say Maximize Viewport. Zoom in a little bit. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create this shape. And really what I want to do is don't want to get every single tiny little bit in there. And I'm going to come over here to Geometry to create. I'm going to go over to Shapes, and we're going to use Line. Now, don't worry about making the perfect outline of the state when you're going through. You just want to get basic points in there. I used to try to get things perfect inside here. I don't even try anymore when I'm doing it, because it starts to make your hand cramp up as you're going through. The best thing to do is just get a general approximation of it and then head over to the origin point you started at and click on it. And you get this option to close the spline. And you want to say yes, because you want a closed shape. We're going to go over to Modify now, because once you have the raw material in there, now you can go back in and start refining it, like I've said in the basic geometry tutorials. I'm going to click on the little arrow. I can go into Vertex. Now I can start grabbing my points. Oops, I clicked on Segment. Click on Vertex, right click, go to Move, and now I can move it around. Let's go ahead, let's grab all these points, right, region select them, and then just hover over one of them, right click, and go over here to Tools 1, and go up, and we're going to make sure these are all set to corners. Because now I can refine the general shape of it. And when you do this, your instincts may be to go in and to really make it complicated. Don't. In a way, there's this sort of outline of the coast here, and I would just kind of do what I'm doing. I'm just going to aim for what I call the peaks, right? That's any point that's kind of coming out a little bit further. I'm not going to worry about the valleys, the little areas of the coast that come in more. So here I am, I'm just kind of adjusting it to get it to sort of match the general shape. And now I'm going to go back in. This is a little bit too much off for me. So I'm going to come over here to Geometry and say Refine. And when I refine, I can add a point. Maybe I'll add another one here. I think I might want another shape there. Maybe another one here. And another one there. And then just right click to get out of that. Now you can grab those points and move them. So just don't overdo it, right? It's easy to want to really match it. It's not necessary. There's no bonus points for getting it closer to the shape. Plus, when we go to make geometry out of it, you don't want it to be too accurate, because then you may run into errors when you try to turn it into geometry. Another one in there. And then I don't like having it come out to a point as extreme as this one here. So I might actually come in and just chamfer that a little bit. There we go. And maybe I'll chamfer it. Let's make sure we're keeping all our points corners though. And really, I'm only keeping them corners for the purposes of the projects that I'm specifically doing. There's no problem with making splines with rounded corners. It's actually what makes the tools very, very cool and fun to work with. I'm going to go in and refine this a little bit. And now I'm done noodling. All right, there's my overall outline of Texas. I'm going to come over here, click, and say Restore Viewport. There we go. There's a reference. So now, how do we turn this into geometry? Now, I showed you before, we did lathe, right? But this is a full shape, and so lathe isn't going to do it for us. What we want is we want to make this into geometry. Now, there is a number of different ones, like there's actually a modifier for extrude, which defaults to a value of 0, but you can increase it. Right? The shape, the direction that the object's orientation, if you go to local, the object's orientation to its local coordinate system is very important when working with something like extrude, because it will always extrude along Z. So if you drew it in the front, the values would be extruding straight up, and you'd have to go back and rework them a little bit. There's another one. There's a bevel. Bevel allows you, think of it like this, you have 3 different values, or 3 different types of extrude. So I could say 10, 10, and 10. Now the reason that you have those is because you also have this starting outline. So if I set my starting outline to like 5, you see how everything pushes out. But if I put it to a negative value, like -5, that kind of moves it in. And be careful if you got little tiny corners that may cause geometry errors, but maybe I'll just be careful and just do like -2.5. So see how it's a little bit smaller now. Now if I take my next outline to a +2.5, that's where the bevel starts to get in, because now you can use the outline to create that. I'll leave level 2, I'll leave that at 0, but then at level 3, I'll bring that back into -2.5 outline. And that's kind of how regular bevel works. If I had these at smaller values, like 5, 5, 5, it would be a little less Fisher-Price. Sorry, so that's regular bevel. Now, what if you want something even fancier? Right? We've all seen fancy furniture, like the dining room tables and things like. What if we want to do kind of an edge like that? So I'm gonna now, instead of working in the front, I'm gonna work here in the instead of working in the top, I'm gonna work over here in the front. I'm gonna go over here to create, and I'm gonna create a rectangle. I'd like to see everything, kind of the overall shape, because I'm just gonna draw it out here. I want my table to be about this tall. I wanna make a circle like right here. And now I'm gonna just select the rectangle, right click, and say convert to editable spline. And I'm going to go in, and just like we did with lathe, I'm going to use attach and click on the circle. So now they're one object. And if I expand here, I'm going to go into spline and select the rectangle and use Boolean, but this time I'm going to switch to subtraction. I'm going to cut out where that circle is. Maybe I might want to adjust the position of the circle a little bit. Scale it up a little. All right, there we go. So Boolean, subtraction, click on the circle, and now I have this interesting shape. So let's go click on editable spline there so I can select my Texas. And now I'm going to select Bevel Profile. Bevel Profile is really great because what it is there's geometry here. Right? But if I go in, I'm going to switch to Classic. And in classic mode, I'm able to select another shape. And so if I click on this shape here, what that does is now I have my geometry. And the outer edge matches this shape. and see how that's a lot more interesting now. Now we can also take this further, and if we take this object, it gets added to this mesh. See, it's hard to zoom in at because it always stays really small, but at the origin of the model is a little crisscross. That represents the spline shape, and that's where your model is added representative to that. So you could come back in here and grab vertex points and actually move them and adjust them because the Bevel Profile Modifier is referencing it. Right? So we could take this and move these things around. And when it gets really interesting is if you go into segment and you select one segment and hit delete, it'll actually just go ahead and it will cap that off with geometry. Now I've left some additional segments on there, so it actually has like a, let's select our table and make it a darker color so it's a little bit easier to see the segments on it. But see, now it has a little capper on there of edges. We can actually grab those vertex points and move those over. Maybe we don't want them that long. Just right click on those specific points and make them corners. But see how now it's kind of matching that. Now, the shape, the overall shape is a little bit larger than we'd want it to be of Texas. So maybe we'll come in here to Profile Gizmo and just, knowing that it's a left-right movement because of how the model's made, we can push this in to get it to line up a little better. There we go. I can turn that off. And if we see areas where the model's kind of clipping in on itself, maybe we don't like that. We can go down here to Vertex and turn on Show End Results, and we can actually adjust the shape a little bit more. If we wanted it to be separated, we could adjust the shape so that it does. If the model overlaps on itself, you end up with weird distortions. And so that's just making sure that, one, the model is a closed model, and then two, you have enough of an opening there for the different parts. So that's really it. That's working with Bevel Profile. I find this to be a really powerful and useful tool, and we will be coming back and using this one again.